Okay, guys, let's talk about what setback is. Setback is the distance from the center of our radius bar. Okay, so there's our radius, and that's the center, and everything is being measured to that center point. Okay, so what is setback? Well, there's the word there. And so what setback is the distance that we're going to set back the pivot point of our bending brake. So that point, the distance that we set back from the center of the radius. And why we do this is, if we don't set this pivot point back to the correct point, that mold point, then what's going to happen is something bad. So let's have a look. Okay, so here's my bending brake, and we can see, I'm going to open the brake up, and we can see that pivot point. And see, there's the pivot point, right? It's the point at which the bending portion of the bending arm of the bending brake is going to lift and bend our piece of material, right? So there's my pivot point right down there. And of course, the center of my radius, there's my nose bar, and so right in there, the center of that little circle, semicircle there, the center of that is our center of our bend radius, right? And so that's the most important. That's got to be in the right position, because directly below that bend tangent line, directly below that is where the bend is going to start. Okay, so let's take our piece of metal and let's stick our piece of metal in the bending brake. Okay, and I'm going to close the nose bar down on top of my piece of metal. Okay, so now if I was to bend this 90 degrees, here, I'm bending my piece of metal, and there's my 90-degree bend, right? Okay, you can see there's my nice 90-degree bend, and everything's okay. But let's say I wanted to bend more than that. Let's say I'm going to bend like 120 degrees. Well, if I don't set that pivot point back, what happens? Well, let's see if we can really get right in there and see what happens. There's my metal. It's been bent around the bending nose bar. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is now I'm going to keep trying. Oh, okay, it's hard. Oh, I'm going to keep going, trying to bend that piece of metal. Oh, what happened there? Well, if I bend it and I don't move the pivot point back, what happens? I end up with two pieces of metal, right? It cuts it right at that point because there's not enough space, there's not enough, really the skin thickness, so that bend can go all the way around the top, and we still have thickness to be able to make space for the material to be bent all that way, okay? And so that's why we have to move our pivot point out, because if we don't, we end up with two pieces of metal. We've got to have enough space so that we can wrap that piece of material all the way around and bring it to the angle that we want and not crush it with the bending arm. Okay, so how we calculate and how we set our setback is we go and move the pivot point down here away from or closer to the center of that radius. And so setback, that number represents that distance, the distance from the pivot point to the center of the radius. Okay, what else can I tell you? That's probably pretty good. Hopefully that makes a little bit more sense when we actually talk about setback.